What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all of the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware for the last week. I think we have a whole 4 news articles this week. I'm super excited. Mark Matthews is going to be joining us later. And if you don't know who Mark Matthews is, you probably don't show up to events. We'll talk more about that later, but let's jump straight into the news.
What's up, Dom?
What's happening?
Man,
so before we get to the news, let's talk about this event we attended, though, this week. So that was really cool, and it deserves a little bit of sunshine. And I surprised you with this one.
Sure.
I forgot to talk about it before the show. But we went to Community Minds. I just want to say, they did a fantastic job putting that together. We don't get to go to many events. It's literally just workshops and panels. There's so much learning. So huge shout out. And if you see another one come up, I hope he does it again. Definitely check out MSP Community Minds.
Yeah, for sure. You and I, Dom, played a game called the MSP's Worst Day. And this game will be available for MSPs. It's a fantastic tabletop exercise to get hearts and minds bought into cybersecurity through the lens of an event that happened to me and to Robert Chaffee and to a few others that participated in making this game. And it walks MSPs through this real challenge of trying to restore all of the assets of a client base after they've all been ransomed, and what that looks like on a day-to-day decision-making process where you're having to say no to some of your favorite clients because you're saying yes to someone else. And it's a fun game, I suppose. I don't know if people that walked out of the room would agree. Fun being the defining. Yeah.
It is valuable, though. It's very valuable.
For sure. Valuable. That's for sure. We could say valuable, maybe not per se fun. Well, let's get into the news. We've got, I'd just like to keep people's mind on these supply chain type repository challenges, right? PowerShell Gallery from Microsoft was having lax policies for package management on Microsoft's PowerShell Gallery code repository, allowed threat actors to perform type squatting type things. Aquasec's Nautilus team discovered that users can submit to the PowerShell Gallery packages with very similar names to existing repos and actually typo squat and catch people, which, to Dom, typo squatting is not anything new, right? That's like IGN homograph attacks on domains
super and old
and all of those things. Yeah. But a third flaw exposed, right? First, hidden packages that we see, this typo squatting, and then a third flaw has the ability to expose unlisted packages and modules on the platform, which are normally not indexed, which means now I can't search for it, but I can actually list it, which means what? Brute forcing. I now can potentially brute force those packages and get to those things. Disclosure mitigation, they reported all the flaws to Microsoft in 2022 and showed it, of course, now look at this, September to December, of course, they were able to still replicate that, which means they knew about it and it existed that long. And in January, they started a short-term solution. But the point is that don't forget that when you put things in GitHub or when you put things in PowerShell repositories and galleries, those things are going to be attacked, and their security, the way they're secured and how they function, are quite valuable. So we did have an update, it looks like, just by Bill yesterday, saying added Microsoft comment down there, but I guess I don't have that anymore. But this was just the update date. So anyways, Don, what are your thoughts on this, though? This is just a common extension of supply chain risk, isn't it?
Yeah, this is akin to using Node to add packages to your code, right? That's effectively, or winget is a better Windows example, where you're trusting, or Chocolatey, you're trusting some level of repository to pull down code.
Right.
And typo squatting is a super common one. I've never really trusted PowerShell Gallery, right? I'm very, very careful about what I'm doing in Gallery. Make sure you're using the right docs. Make sure you understand exactly what you're doing. Because much like, you might be able to break in and infect someone's Yum or APT repos in Linux, this is the equivalent of that, right? So this isn't a new attack. It's actually pretty cool.
ELI5, what they're trying to do, right? They want to put a title just like the one you're trying to actually use and get you to use theirs, and have that code actually have malicious code and content inside it. That's what they're trying to do.
Right.
And so by doing that and injecting those similar typo squatting type things, as well as then obviously some of the other abuse below. But anyways, I think, from a fix perspective too, the things that I want to call out is oftentimes a researcher, and thereby potentially even a threat actor, may find something, report something, go through the normal channels, wait for someone to say yes and approve it, just demonstrate it at the end for proof of concept, and then not
Right.
have a fix for 4 months, 3 months for some of these things that need to be addressed. And it's just one of those
Right.
things where just need to be faster and be better. But let's go on. Google Chrome adding some cool stuff, right? They're allowing them to auto remove malicious extensions, is the point. Google announced plans to add a new feature in the upcoming version of its Chrome browser to alert users when an extension they've installed has been removed from the Chrome store. So what happens in the life cycle of things is the Chrome extension gets pulled by Chrome, but it doesn't mean it's been pulled out of everybody's browser. This feature set for release along 117 allows the users to be notified when an add-on has been unpublished by a developer. The tech giant said it intends to highlight such extensions under a safety check category in privacy and security. So I think this is a awesome thing, right, that we're starting to do. We also go on to say that they're actually doing HTTPS for all URL navigations, even when users click a link that explicitly declares, I bet that meant to say HTTP, but a lot of good features coming. And this is kind of one of those things where, the Chromium project for Edge and Google have built a pretty stable browser for a lot of these things, but
Right.
the extension piece is huge. And we can go off this view and just come back to Dom and I. Dom, so what are your thoughts about this? This is kind of where Google is now saying people have weaponized our store and we're pulling stuff. I think this comes down to that secure by default and secure by design type behavior, right? In your mind. What are your thoughts?
Kind of, right? Like, so browser extensions have always been a scary thing, right? Firefox came out with their extension store way back when it had those issues, and Mozilla has done a good job for the most part getting that under control. Google has the same problem. I've actually had extensions get marked as malicious. And a huge thing that happens in these scenarios is not extensions I wrote, to be clear, extensions I was using, is
Fair.
somebody maintains that extension and then decides they want a payday and they sell it off, and now it's got tracking code and malvertising and all those kind of things, right? But I think what's new here is there's a lot more capability for me as the consumer of the browser to know that that actually happened, because, and I haven't used Chrome in over a year, but thinking sort of strategically about it, the extension I was using that got disabled, I did not know until I realized the extension wasn't doing what I installed it to do. And suddenly it was like, oh, it's disabled because it's malicious. And I was like, oh, that would have been cool to get like a toast or a banner or something about, instead of me just not knowing it was malicious at some point. So that was the biggest challenge for me. And also understand that that is a very open ecosystem. I've submitted extensions to the Chrome Web Store. I have them published, and it's not hard to do, right? Like you just sign up and say, please. So there's a lot of
And
crap in there. You need to be aware of what you're installing.
Yeah, and malicious browser extensions are scary for one reason. They have the browser purview, meaning they are
Right.
already at the end that's been disencrypted traffic that is meant for user display, that is meant for user consumption. And that's why they do all those neat things. That's why they can do the, ad checks and pop-up blocks and all the things, is because once you have a browser permission and browser extension permission, you can do a lot of things. A lot of malware, like redline malware, things like that are info stealers, can
Right.
live in those spaces. So it's a really good thing to be able to have a healthy ecosystem of when something's depublished, it is gone. Once we find it, you hope it never makes it through the health checks to begin with, but once it's found, then it can be removed for violating
Well, and
terms
we
of
should be
service, whatever
like,
it may
it is
be.
impossible to have a 100% sanitary
Yeah,
um,
true story.
app marketplace, right? Like Apple is known for having the most, secure, the most sanitary app store, right, for Mac. It
Sure.
still happens, right? That doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's unlikely. So you have
Yeah.
to be aware of these things. And also, I don't understand how people survive with 4 million extensions in Chrome. But I would just take a minute to audit it every now and then. If it's not something you're
Yeah.
using anymore, just get rid of it.
Yep. 100%. All right, let's look at something that a fat guy in a pizza place told us about 2 years ago. But we're
That's
starting we're starting to see,
why I picked
heaven
this article.
forbid, a phishing campaign was observed predominantly targeting a notable energy company in the US, employing QR codes to slip malicious emails into inboxes and bypass security. Why? Because the link scanners were presumably not scanning the links coming from the QR code. Roughly 1/3 of the 1,000 emails attributed to this email targeted a large U.S. energy company, while the remaining attempts were rated against firms in manufacturing, insurance technology, and a smattering of other things. Cofense, which is awesome, who spotted this campaign. It's the first time QR codes have been used at that scale. right? They didn't name the energy company, of course, but they defined them as major. And they say, listen, this is great for attacking 365 accounts, right, and stuff like that. And there are some settings one can set for it. So hiding the redirection in the URL code, abusing legitimate services, and using base 64 encoding of the link that then is out of that help evade detection and get through email protection filters. Anyways, Dom, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, it's yet another method of delivery of an attack against email and to get into those humans' hands, right?
I'm just waiting for the first security event to come out and say, okay, we scan QR codes now, right? Like,
Sure.
Hopefully genuinely hope that happens. It's going to be a marketing thing, but I hope it genuinely starts scanning QR codes. If we think about sort of this attack, you and I have talked about QR code based attacks, right? We yell at marketing every time they give us QR codes put up on screen. And it's because you don't know where it goes, right? Until you
Especially if you have a link shortener in there too.
Right,
if you add in
exactly.
a short.io as well as a QR code, I can do all kinds of neat things.
And there's also the concept, passkeys are going to be built around QR codes. Like, that's the functionality of a passkey, essentially, if you're not using some sort of actual key. So if you think about that, right, if I can present some imitation UI of a passkey and get you to give me your password that way. So there's a lot of creative, net new green space opportunity for threat actors in the QR code space.
Yep, for sure. Long story short, I think there's probably already products that we're ignorant of that are already scanning QR codes. And so if you have those options available, and it looked like there was some discussion about Defender having them, then you use them, of course. But QR codes can be dangerous, and here we see them actually being used in the wild. One of the last ones we want to bring up, Play Ransomware Group. This was an article that I saw. I think someone had referenced it on LinkedIn, but it's through dark reading. And it's just talking about attackers using remote monitoring and management tools, or RMMs, of MSPs to gain unfettered access to target networks. We know that. We've seen it in Kaseya. We've seen it in Kaseya before. We've seen it in SolarWinds. We've seen it. The fast-rising Play Ransomware gang has targeted the city of Oakland earlier this year, as hitting and managed service providers around the globe in an attack. One troublesome aspect of the campaign is that the threat actors' use of intermittent encryption, essentially being able to evade detection from that. It seems to be attacking people in the US, Australia, UK, Italy, and other countries. And this does come into play where they're actually really, really fast and are really, really leaning into the understanding of attack like this. They go on to actually quote, the most notable example remains the R-Evil, or Sotonokibi ransomware group against Kaseya's VSA network early on. So, Dom, what are your thoughts on this? It's horrifying.
You mentioned,
Go ahead.
You mentioned their encryption tactics, right? And what they're doing is they're encrypting part of the data. It doesn't actually get you around detection, right?
Right.
It's
faster,
fast, right? If I'm encrypting your data for security purposes because I don't want Matt to steal it, I'm encrypting all your data. But that takes forever. That's a whole lot of math, right? The idea of incremental encryption is that I can essentially encrypt just enough of that file to make it useless, right? The data is partially still there, but if I have to encrypt a byte instead of a megabyte, I hypothetically move 1,024 times faster.
And if I still destroy that first part and it's needed for the use of that data, the entropy of that size of piece of data and how much it could be different means there's so many iterations to recreate that data for it to be usable, right? And it becomes very, very hard to do. But yet, to your point, Dom, it's significantly faster in accomplishing its goal, which is destroying your use of your files when it comes to ransomware. But that combined with them being deployed vis-a-vis attacking identity methods, as that article goes on, which I didn't want to read the whole article to you, but they were actually attacking identity methods. And that's how I would attack. I would do phishing. I would attack your identity, become that you, and then take advantage of the lack of conditional access policies you have in place. In fact, I've done a whole talk on this called How I Would Hack You with Tom Lawrence and Jason Slagle, where we describe how I would attack the identity side. And that's what they're doing. And that's what horrifies me. And here's why. If you don't detect that initial identity compromise, me stealing your token, AITM attacks, if you don't detect that first takeover of the identity, and they have access to do admin type things that are asynchronous. What I mean by that is I can make a script in your RMM that is asynchronous to detection, because it's going to be detected on the other end when it is delivered. It is not detected by your tools in your RMM, which means that I don't even trigger anything inside your perimeter defenses. And the only place you would notice it is after the payload has been delivered at the end by the agent. And it only then gets attributed backwards because Kyle Hanselevin and like 12 friends tell you that's how it happened. But
And
at the end of the day,
and
sorry.
you've probably set up some level of like, dear endpoint protection vendor, anything that happens in this folder is kosher.
Let it go. It came from my RMM. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a horrifying one. And that's what made the Kaseya event, the SolarWinds event so very, very, very scary, is that it's using those giant tools to give me a competitive advantage of getting the job done to attack your systems, right? So, all right, we beat the news segment to death. We crammed in 4 articles. Let's hear some brilliance from Robin Harris, and then we'll come back with our guest, Mark.
Hello, I am continuing my coverage on AI, and I am making my case for AI governance. It's a thing. We need to put this in place sooner rather than later. And in this episode, we are going to talk about intellectual property and protecting your company from unintended consequences. We really don't have the laws in place to really address how this new technology is changing things. And so there is a risk of copyright infringement, and companies can be exposing their intellectual property without even realizing it. Now, the data that AI is trained on, where does it come from? Where does that data come from? Whose data is it? Was it data that was licensed to the public? Anybody could do anything with it? Or is it just data that's on the internet? So meaning, they could be scraping the data from different company pages, copyrighted articles, copyrighted music, this type of thing, and then using it to create their responses and their derivative products, right? We need to think about is ChatGPT is wonderful, but you don't want to put your data into ChatGPT. You want to ask questions and get data out, but you don't want to expose your data to becoming part of the data set that now everybody can dip into. You want to protect your brilliance. You want to protect your company's intellectual property. Another example, during the Senate hearing, when they were looking at AI, one of the senators was talking about, she asked ChatGPT to write a song from Garth Brooks. She was from Nashville. And she wanted a song like XXX, whatever the song was. And so the data that she came back with, it was evident that what ChatGPT did was went and took Garth Brooks' song and it reworked it a little bit. So it took his intellectual property, his copyrighted data, and it created a derivative work. So that raised her eyebrow because she says, did Garth Brooks get compensated for that? And the answer to that is no. So what we want to be careful of is when we are doing things, we need to be careful that we are not actually inadvertently participating in copyright infringement when we're getting data. And we don't want to expose ourselves to copyright infringement of our data. So we are going to have to be a little more conscious of the integrity of the data, who owns the data, where did it come from? Are we doing what we need to do to protect our intellectual property and the intellectual property of others? We can see more things coming down the line from, laws and regulations globally that are going to attempt to answer some of those questions. But right now, while we don't have those answers, we're going to have to do our due diligence to protect ourselves.
All right. Dom, we're on the other side of Robin Harris's brilliant advice for that. I'm excited about this one because you and I have both gotten to spend quite a bit of time with this individual over the last probably 2.5 years, 2 years, give or take, right? Maybe less than 2. It just feels like
Something
8
like
years, maybe. But yeah, it's been great. And this person stood out to me just because of how much he took out of every event, like how much he wrote down, how much he walked away with, but not just that, how much he regurgitated back and it stuck with him. Like, you and I have this fear when we're on stage of going, please walk away and do one thing that we talk about. I know in these conferences, you're going to get hundreds of things, do one thing. And yet here we have an individual that has probably just been the most impressive about taking these things and having them in their future and making sure they understands that he took them away as tasks, So
I mean, how
we
many
got a
people do we
video.
run into at a show and start talking to and they pull out a notebook? Like,
Right. Like literally in the middle of the conversation. Like, wait a
Yeah.
second. I want to make sure I'm not missing this.
Right.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That stood out to me massively. Let's go ahead and let Mark introduce himself. We got a nice video from when he was at one of our conferences and sat down, and then we'll bring him on and we'll have some good conversations.
I have lost count. If it was in Denver and I got an invite, I was there. So I'd say at least probably 5 or 10 of them. And I go because when I first came on with this company with Loud Technology, I was trying to figure out like the methods of getting it bigger. And I reached out to my Pax8 channel account manager. And he said, well, it's a shame we're not having them right now, but these boot camps would be perfect. That's just what you're looking for. And I had to do them virtually for a long time. And then when I finally came and started learning stuff, the value that I get is from other business leaders and growth strategists that have got any sort of struggle or solution that I'm looking for that they've already worked with and I didn't even think of. That's my biggest simple answer for value. What's unique about Pax8? They've got like incentives for partners and prospects. So in the beginning, they got me with the Uber Eats vouchers for the virtual events. So what that boils down to is they care about customer success and they reward their customers, so to speak. And the other vendors, they don't really have like perks, so to speak. So that was what got me in. And then once I started like meeting some of the individuals and how passionate they are and how much they care about what they're doing, that's a hook for me. I like to work with people that are like that. Instead of just being like a distributor, they are more immersive. They're more involved with their client market. So that's what makes them unique. They understand the value in doing events and getting people connected and tying that emotional aspect into it, and that's what makes them unique. I would recommend Pax8 to other MSPs, and for that very reason, because they understand the importance of customer success and being involved with people.
So, Mark, I got to ask, did they hand you that giant envelope of cash before you sat down to record, or was that after you sat down to record with the Pax8 team?
We had a payment plan.
I love it, man. Welcome to the game, dude.
That one.
This is so good to have you here, man. I say this jokingly beforehand, but you were a breath of fresh air getting to watch your style of absorption and how much you took away from the security boot camp. I think you went to the pre-security boot camp, the OG security boot camp, and all of those things. But, tell me a little bit more about Loud Technology and what you guys do.
Well, Loud Technology, as you can tell from the name, when it started, we were doing more of a digital marketing effort, getting people's brands out and using the modern technology to boost that brand. So hence the name Loud Technology. And we've got our slogan is, let's amplify your business. But it started out as more of honestly, it started out as our founder doing favors for a couple of friends. And then that that turned into a wave of success that became the digital marketing stuff, and it's kind of evolved into more of an MSP where we're licensing Microsoft products and supporting everything from printers to desktops to complex business applications.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'd love to actually just for a second pick a little bit more into that. So you guys started in a very odd way as a MSP, right? Coming from digital marketing, digital empowerment. And what's so funny, and you've heard me talk about this, Wes Spencer, myself, Marnie Stockman, and Juan Fernandez wrote a book recently called The MSP Owner's Handbook, the SASE edition, right? And during that, we conjectured that there's going to be a time where if I start a company tomorrow, if I do that, I'm not going to have a server infrastructure. I'm going to have an identity and then software solutions. And then it's going to be about how well my MSP provides value to me along working on and in my business for me and making me better at digital marketing, making me better at how I use my tools, making me better. And I think you're kind of proving that the other side may be a little bit of a validation of that you're coming back in and now coming from one part of a digital advisory space and now being actually the person doing the wrench turning for the day-to-day technical delivery. How's that journey been for you? Is that a fair statement of kind of what your journey's been like?
Yeah, you could definitely say that the journey has been very challenging because the technology is so quick to change. You know, I will have gotten a digital badge or whatever from one company last week, and then this next week, you know, it's not called Azure AD anymore. Now it's called
Now it's Intra ID. Yeah, exactly.
So it's the technical part is so quick to change, but with that comes beauty because, you know, new life changing, and we're able to stay on top of all these upcoming changes and be there for our customers. And hearing the success stories and just the way that we've helped people bring value to their business is so uplifting.
Yeah. And I also hear though you work with your dad on this. You started that. We actually took a minute and snagged some time with your dad. I don't know if you've seen this or not yet, but we're going to go ahead and play this video. Let's go ahead and launch the video with his dad.
I'm Skip Matthews, and our company is Loud Technology. Boy, that's an interesting question. How did we get started? It went back to about 2008. We had just sold a company, a filtered internet service provider, and people just started calling, asking for technical help. I'm not a technical guy, but I've always been in the technical industry since, I guess, out of graduate school, working with IBM. So I've always been in the technical space, but people started calling with technical questions and needing help. So it was not that I had this great vision to start an IT services company. It just happened. And so that's kind of, as we've come through, I think we're on Loud 3.0 now because we've made several transitions from break fix to buckets of hours to true managed services today. Well, you know, as parents, we spend our adult lives trying to create an environment for our kids to grow up and be what they were created to be. And having your son actually work with you, it's pretty amazing to have a front row seat to see what he has become. We've always worked together, I guess. Even when he was a little boy, we were out in western Kansas, and we were starting one of the first rural cell phone companies. And as you know, everything is by towers, and so we would go riding around in the car looking for towers to put cell phone equipment on. And he would be involved riding around all over western Kansas. And then we sold that business and started the internet service provider business. And he would have been high school age by then, and he would come in and work, and it was mostly licking stamps and stuff in envelopes. And then he started manning the phones and doing customer service and support. And then more time went on, and we started this business, and he was in a position, and we were in a position where we needed some help with sales and marketing. He was actually living in Denver at the time, and most of what he does could be done remotely. So he jumped on board and has been kind of doing our sales and marketing, but he's also our guy that goes to all the Pax8 stuff. I think he's been to every webinar that Pax8 has ever done. He goes to all the events and has met people all over the country. And so he's been a wealth of information for me in that respect. Pax8 has been great. We've learned a lot from, I guess Mark has learned a lot from going to the sessions and seeing all the webinars beyond. It was awesome. And it was a great place to be able to get to know some folks from all over, folks that are in the same position as you are, that have experienced some of the same things. And whenever you can learn from somebody else's mistakes, that's a good thing. And so we spent some time learning from others. It's a great way. As we've kind of come off of COVID, I think there's a pent-up demand for community, and I think that filled a void that we've seen in our industry. And so Pax8 has been good for that community and the collaboration. And so Mark, going to the Pax8 events, started talking about managed services, and started talking about how instead of being break fix or being reactive, being proactive. And so the next phase that we went to, we started doing some of that. And the next phase, which is going to be starting at the end of this month, we're not doing any residential. We're not doing any hourly work at all, none. We're only doing managed services. And so it might work and it might not. We'll see.
I bet it works.
I bet it does. Yes. That was really good.
Yeah. Dom, it's cool because at that transition time frame, and Mark, that transition when you finally shed those hourly clients, when you finally shed the residential visits and the very different things, it stops pulling you in different directions. It stops pulling you into this, well, we follow this for this, but not for that, because those aren't. And I remember that moment well. That was the year we jumped to the 3 million in revenue really rapidly once we made that decision. It just let us focus and let us be really good at what we did well. But anyways, yeah, that's awesome hearing from him. Wish
really
you luck
cool.
on that.
And
transition.
it's a really cool story, right? Like working with family in a way that works. It's really cool to see that. So hats off to you and your dad. And I think Loud is a really cool business. It can go a lot of places. And he talked a lot.
Brother,
yeah.
My brother has talked about starting another new project with my other brother or with me or whatever, and he hasn't quite wrapped his head around that family piece. It's awesome, and it's a huge blessing to be able to work with family, but at the same time, it's a lot of extra energy because you have to really be patient. You really have to say, okay, whatever preconceived notion I had, I thought my counterpart would think this way because of this situation in our family life from years ago. You have to use energy to put that aside, put the pride down, and say, okay, we're talking about the business's best interest. Let's see here. Where do we go? We go that way.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And it's probably really difficult at first, right? It sounds like you found the groove. But I don't know. I was trying to put myself in those shoes and thinking about exactly what you just said. And it's really cool that you guys are there. And a lot of Skip's talk was about events and about your attendance to events. And we've had several episodes about events, post-event shows and pre-event shows, and bringing on other attendees and just talking about like, what do we get out of it? Because from our perspective, Matt and I get to get up on stage and maybe teach something or interact. And sometimes we sell stuff like anyone else, right? But what we find value out of, it happens. Got paid bills.
I know.
But where we really find the value is frankly, like after the show, having a conversation with you and with others and getting real, just genuine information and thoughts. But what do you get out of shows, and why do you love going so much?
Okay, that's a great question, but that's exceedingly easy for me to answer. The reason I go to the boot camps is for the Uber Eats vouchers.
Fair.
All right. Well, that's the premise of the show. How do you maximize your points?
Right.
Oh, there's a couple of other reasons that I go. And I mean, secondly, is, I'm a sales professional and I'm always peeping out sales strategies from anybody and everybody. Most importantly, people in my space. So if you're in the MSP space, if you're a vendor, if you're a customer, if you're an MSP, if you're selling MSPs, I want to know what you're doing and what's going on. So when I go to those events, whoever's at the top of the chain, they're the ones that are sponsoring the events. They're the ones that are having their keynotes and their presentations. I get to see exactly what are they talking about, what are the MSPs' pain points, what's everything from every angle, and how can I leverage that knowledge into my service and my business model. That'd be the second reason. Third reason is obviously new skills. These boot camps are really like dialed in on this one specific thing. And there's usually something that I'm unsure about in that specific thing. And I've already got my list of questions and I'm able to go there and I can, not only can I hit up the panel if I'm lucky enough, I can hit people, at the happy hour, I can hit people at the lunch, at the breakfast, and I can get like really valuable, insightful solutions to whatever it is I'm not sure about at the moment. And I guess that would be most of the reasons that I go to them and that I value them.
Yeah, what's funny about that, one of the things that I love the most about it, and I want to bring up a LinkedIn post that you did after one of these events. I think for me, what was the coolest about this is just the thought that you put into it, right? You said, after all, we're all connected. None of us can accomplish anything meaningful alone. Dude, you're preaching to my soul right now on that, right? And you're getting into all of this saying, relationships are the impetus for meaningful accomplishments. Not only did Machine Logic Cybersecurity Summit foster relationship growth, it also fostered education in the fight against cybercrime. And then you gave numbers and stats and you tagged people in it. But the comments that it drove in there were fantastic. The engagement was great, but you broke down stuff for people as to what the value was in that. And I really loved seeing that style of yours, right? Combine that with one more post you did. Let's take a look at this second one as well. And the second one was one where you really broke down a lot of the actual talks that were coming from this in the first point. Now, the subject matter of why do people love this Matt Lee guy, let's ignore that because I don't believe that to be fundamentally true. But I love the fact that you took this time to say, okay, right, is you broke down, like I cried legitimately when I read this one. But I think you have captured so many parts that were there, right? Yeah, we raised 0.6. We raised $200,000 for charity. I have German Shepherds and I've rescued them. If people take that much time, you can pull that down now. I don't want to keep it up. Thanks. But, you took the time to actually, it hurts me. But anyways, it took the time to actually put points that were real meaningful points. And I've seen you do this on 40 posts. I mean, you could go back and look at your posts in LinkedIn. If you're not following Mark Matthews, you should be. But if you look back, you take the time to actually describe things you took away from something and then regurgitate them on paper. And man, I don't know. Talk to me about that. Where does that come from, brother? Like it was touching and you clearly spent time on it, but yeah, anyways, talk to me about it.
Well, one of the things you said was you really break things down for people. And what I heard there was validation. I'm being seen. Because when I first started this job, I'm coming in as a marketing role. My father's wanting to grow this company. The way he words it is, I need help with the marketing. And it was like a light bulb moment for me because I've done marketing in the past and I had gotten back into dabbling around with what are the new trends and stuff. And I've discovered these marketing courses online that I was getting into. But big picture is it was like an actor getting ready for a role. Everything I did it in role. So if
Yeah.
I'm marketing to people and my job is to find more people like them to provide my solution for, I need to understand them really well. And anytime I talk about
Sure.
my customer, I'm talking in first person as the customer. So
Oh,
when I'm
that's epic.
speaking and when I'm writing my posts and stuff, I'm trying to speak on a level where, hey, we don't know about all this techie stuff. We don't know about this, but we understand emotions and we understand numbers and facts. So how can you tie these things together and give us a simple, concise message that says, hey, technology is valuable. Cybersecurity is not a joke. And then I also
Yeah.
like to lift people up. So I always try to like find folks that are worth a dang that I'm comfortable attaching my brand
Well,
to go and pick out whatever it is that I think they're great at and
man,
try to lift them up so that I can boost their brand and boost our cause because we're on the same team.
there's it's just something to be said for that last statement, right? Like lift them up. When we talk about community, we talk about what's so beautiful about this channel and why I love the arguments and the discourse and the conversation and all the things that are part of it is in genuine. There are people out there that just try to lift people up. right? And I think that's just such a good mantra to have. And it kind of comes in that thing is you can't make your crown any brighter by tarnishing theirs, right? And so why not build people up? It's so awesome, man. All right, we're trying to get into some questions around cybersecurity, right? And we're doing this series, or Dom and I are talking about doing a series of bringing on MSPs and asking some of similar questions. So, have you ever been involved in a cyber incident? Like, if you can discuss it, please tell me what happened without really divulging any client information or identifiable information that gets us in trouble. But tell me about the worst cyber incident you've ever been in, brother, and elaborate on it just a bit.
Well, this
Somebody
one
asked
would
in
have
the
been,
comments, why does Dom not have a stash? And I just want to tackle, I don't think Dom can grow a stash. I think I've watched him try real hard one time. So we covered the stash and beard for him on this show. Yeah, sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to do that.
No, totally. As far as the worst cyber instance goes, I would say on a customer standpoint, it would have been about a year and a half ago. We have a huge client that manages a lot of money, and they got a phishing campaign that the CFO fell for. They said, I think they were spoofing the CEO, pretending to be the CEO.
Okay.
And they said, we need there's some serious personal information, like everybody's application and their social number or something. And she fell for it and sent it to her CEO, supposedly doing her job, but not doing her job on a cyber secure level.
What was the result of that choice? What happened?
Well, unfortunately, she got fired, but nothing came of the cyber incident and all the data that was leaked. There wasn't any blowback from that. But the biggest piece of it was she got a phishing email from what she thought was her boss. We weren't doing, simulations and security training at the time to teach our customers how to avoid this kind of stuff or prevent this kind of stuff. So we both learned a lesson, but fortunately we didn't lose the client, and unfortunately that lady did lose her job. Now, when you ask me what has been my most intense cyber incident, what comes to mind for me is what's affected me the most. And what's affected me the most is being locked out of my own computer or having problems on my own. You were talking about it on the game week before last, how you had got compromised, and I asked in the comments, I said, what did your security ops team do after that? Little did you know I was in the same boat and needed a life. You said, well, my security ops team is awesome. I've already got the new laptop, and I sent my old one to them. They're going to isolate the threat, and then we'll boot up the new one. And that's been the biggest thing for me was I got hacked, and what happened was I was sitting at my desk, and I saw, I've always got all my screens up, and one of the screens was my actual desktop laptop, and I could see my mouse moving around. This next thing I know, somebody's opening my files, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this for one more sec. I could pull my iPad out and started filming it so that I'd have proof. And I was like, what files is this person going after? They opened like a file for how to engage with existing clients or something like that. Anyway, long story short, that was the biggest event that affected me the most. And
wow.
It's because it took me out of the game. I didn't have my work computer anymore because based on your answer, I don't need to be messing around on that computer until that's isolated. And that means don't mess with it anymore. So my company took me off. I've got like a couple of admin privileges for like the partner center and whatnot. So my company had to shut my permissions down. I can't really do anything anymore. And that's what affected me the most.
Brother, I didn't know you were going to pull out something like that. You didn't prepare me mentally for that kind of story, Mark. Like I don't know how I can respond to this. I know, but man, dang, you just sent me down a spiral. I have so many questions, but it sounds like you've isolated the asset and it's being dealt with from a forensics perspective, I hope, and trying to figure out what happened. But this is one of those things where, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, here's my qualm is even with you and with your like advanced sophisticated security ops team that is like the world's smartest. How do I know that they didn't go embed something in some file that's like basic that doesn't get scanned? That's my OneDrive's going to pop that right back into the new machine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the question, right? That's let's talk about this for 2 seconds. I think this is an education moment for a lot of people. That's exactly why when we as MSPs or we as companies have cyber insurance, or hopefully if no cyber insurance, and Dom, we talked about this in the game that we played the other
Yeah.
day, having somebody on retainer that can do these things from a forensics perspective, whether that be your SOC as a service team that's going to tell you whether you're clear to return to action, right? Some MDR teams can sometimes do some of those simple forensics understandings of how somebody got there, right? But at the end of the day, if you have things like that, that's where it's time to figure out the answer of how. And that will then help you get a lot more out of that, right, Mark? Is if I can figure out how that wound up where someone had shell level session, had session connection to my device, then that can determine what those next steps are. And what happened is very important too. And that's where it's so important we start talking about, implementing safeguards to have logs and SIMs that can go back and see what exactly happened here, EDRs that can tell you what was going on the endpoint at the time, so that at some point they can find, this is what happened. But also, more importantly, to your point, Mark, go, hey, we're good now, right? Here's what happened. We know what happened. We've got containment and eradication. And so when you're in an incident, you really want to gain the understanding of what's going on, contain the asset, decide what has happened, and then decide what our next eradication steps are going to be, right? So I didn't mean to get all teachery on this moment, but boy, you gave me just such good cannon fodder for this conversation.
That's a scary
So,
one, man.
yeah.
It is.
If I see my mouse moving, we're going to get real serious real quick. Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, it's like you've dumped your soul into this, your project, whatever,
Yeah.
your MSP. So you've got all this work and all this that you've built up, and now you've got somebody compromising that. So it's like you said, that part, maybe having somebody on retainer to say you're good. I mean, that is a really, really big deal. Like for me, and just the way my mind works, I'm really detail oriented, and it's hard for me. Like I still haven't opened it back up yet. Like I don't even want to mess with it until I can have a better way. I was actually going to ask my Pax8 rep. I was going to say, can I mail you guys my computer and you can figure out what happened to it and keep it from happening again? How much
But I
will
will
that
tell
cost me?
you, yeah, well, if you wanted to know that piece of it, I think we'll tackle that offline, Mark, and really maybe have a quick convo at some point about what the next steps should be and something like that. One thing you could do if you want, as time goes on, and I'll take this as a plug, if an MSP finds themselves in that situation where you yourselves are under something of a compromisation, you have such a due care and due diligence situation from a fiduciary responsibility, right? A money responsibility to do some due care and decide what and figure out what happened. So we'd love to coach MSPs through this. So I started a program. I didn't start it. Actually, Robert Chaffee did. And he talked about it a couple weeks back on our show. It's called the ERT, or Emergency Response Team. And the intention for that is to be able to have somebody that you can go to that has some legal protections in place through the CompTIA agreements that you can say, Matt, give me some advice on this, and give me in a position where I can actually give real advice that's deep to the subject matter of that. And there's not just me, there's 15 or so people that have been in our shoes that are willing to do some of that initial coaching of someone through that type of an incident. Now, in this case, it didn't impact your clients directly yet, it seems like, but it would be something I'd want to answer. And so, definitely might be able to reach out to me in that capacity, Mark, and let's chat about that and give you some advice on that directly. Because this is one of those things where when I was at Iconic, that was my goal. Anytime we had an event where someone did have some payloads, because it happens, that's the way it works. We wanted to know, where did it go? What was the payload? Did we isolate it? Was it contained? Was there any impact to customer data? Was there any impact to our data? And so those are the kind of things you want to answer. And oftentimes that is the use of an insurance policy. That is the reason you have them, is to say, hey, we had this incident. We need to dig into this. What happened? But you can be alleviated a lot of times too by professionals. If you're using a Blackpoint Cyber or a Pillar or a lot of them, they're going to give you the answers of what they've found when you bring that up to them. And that's the first place I'd start from an escalation perspective, is my SOC as a service, my MDR teams, things like that as an MSP. And if you don't have those, I think the advice would be, certainly as an MSP, it would be in your best interest. There's tons of NFRs. There's tons of options to use them at a fairly decent price. Definitely should be having those things in place. You can start getting that resource and that help from a technical perspective without necessarily having to file an insurance claim and things like that. So, I didn't expect this to turn into a complete conversation about incident response, but this is a fantastic exercise, Mark. I love it. Thanks for sharing. That was great.
It was a really wild story. We were not expecting that. But Matt,
Well, this is
you really
yeah,
covered a
buddy.
lot of detect and response, which comes out of a framework, right? So
It does, doesn't
we
it?
hate frameworks here at the game. They're not our thing.
No, we never believe in frameworks. Never
We
said
never
anything
believe
about
in
that.
frameworks. No, but we wanted to ask, and this is something we want to ask any MSP we run into. Do you use a framework internally? Are you working on a framework internally, or thinking about one, and which one?
I am a big Phyllis Lee fan, and I love the CIS framework. That's what we use.
We're trying to split the lines between NIST and CIS, and so we're going to ask this of every company, and we're going to probably have a NIST v CIS war at some point. I think of gathering people, but
It'd be a rap battle.
You know, one of the things, yeah, there'll be a NIST CIS rap battle. Oh Lord. The thing about this is when you start getting into your IG2s and IG3s, which it takes a while to work through it. And as you get into those implementation groups too, that's when you'll start seeing more and more conversation about pen testing, about incident response, about how you're going to work in some of the more detailed pieces of your incident response planning for those type of things. But anyways, I'm glad it's CIS. I'd prefer it be CIS. I got one more thing for you, Marcus. Another one of the exercises we're asking MSPs to do as they come on our show. So imagine you're in this perfect world where your clients have to listen to you, right? You're going to be speaking to them, and they're going to have to listen to you. They've been required. If that was the scenario, and you could tell them one thing and get them to do one thing, what is one thing you wish they'd listen to you about?
You know, this is a great question. I'm a big fan of some ancient history, particularly a very prominent businessman in the BC days who would have gone by the name of Solomon, King Solomon. And he gives a
That
lot
is
of
stretching back.
and one of the things he says, this is back in Bible times, mind you, and this is what I'd want to say to my Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer. Where there are no oxen, the manger is empty, but from the strength of an ox come abundant harvests. So what he's saying here is we've got high technology here, and the people that are using it are getting abundant harvests. So I would hope that you would do what you're awesome at over there. You've started this business. 4 out of 5 businesses fail in the first year. You're still here. You're obviously good at what you do. I would want you to continue to be awesome at what you do and take zero energy away from that to focus on tech cybersecurity stuff and let me do what I'm awesome at. And with that style of relationship, we could have a much more efficient growth that could get the most done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because what you're making an advocation is you focus on doing the awesome stuff, and I'm going to make it easier, more impactful for your clients, better, more secure, better fiduciary responsibility and protection of the assets that you've kindred to me. And so I think that's the point is like, let me do what I want to do. And I think what's interesting about that is think about my attorney or my doctor. They pretty much handle the health stuff. They tell me what to do and I go do it. My attorney, I pay them to make advice and then I take that advice. My CPA, same thing. But you're right, in our industry, even when someone signs on the dotted line and says, yes, I'll do this stuff with you and I'll pay you this much per human, it doesn't mean they're on board to do the things that you need them to do, to take away local admin rights, to allow me to have patch windows that are happening immediately. Like it's that cooperative aspect of it, but that means you need to let me make those decisions and let me set those policies, and you're going to back them up and you're going to enforce them. And that's how you're going to focus on your business. Is that a fair summation of the request there, Mark?
Absolutely.
All right. So one last question to get you to talk through. What's been your biggest win related to getting client buy-in around security growth initiatives? Like you guys are transitioning from break fix. I already know that's a hard win. And I have to imagine security's been a good part of that conversation. But what's your biggest win relating to getting client buy-in? And how'd you do it?
This is easy peasy. Thank you for this question. Now, it goes back to a couple of episodes ago on the game where you guys had your sales expert, David Powell, talking about reasons that people are not, or MSPs are not doing great with cyber sales. And one of those big bullet points was empathy. What he meant when he said empathy was some of these MSPs have not ever had a big cyber incident. So they can't empathize and be like, that really is bad. We really need to do everything we can to protect all of our people from having that problem. So
Yep.
it would have been, we've got two customers. They're actually like geographically really close to each other. And one of them, we had them on the business premium suite. So they had advanced controls and more settings that protected them in a lot more places that I didn't have access to in the business standard. What happened was the same outfit launched a phishing campaign to fish, and it got through on my business standard customer, and it did not get through on my business premium customer. And the business standard customer knew the business premium customer, and knew, they're right next to each other, got a long history. That's all it took. That was my biggest win, and getting a customer to buy in to, this is why we need to spend extra money on this cybersecurity stuff. Oh my gosh, that happened right next door. That could happen to me. Obviously, that solution works. Let's go ahead and roll it out.
This brings me back to Dom, or obviously I'm about to shove somebody off a cliff, right? But this brings me back to this understanding that I tell a little parable for myself, Mark. And it's this understanding, me, you, and Dom Kirby are standing at the top of a cliff looking out over God's beauty. I reach over gently and shove Dom Kirby to his death. There is zero chance, Mark Matthews, that you don't do one of a few
gentle
things.
this time. I appreciate that.
I was gentle. I pushed other people off much harder. You're right. This was nice. I was being loving. But I pushed Dom to his death. You're going to either step back and take a defensive posture, step forward and take an attack posture and push me off to my death, or in both cases, probably run to the bottom of the hill and get away from the dude pushing people off the edge of the cliff. Right? Is that a fair statement of what your human behavior would be in response to that, Mark?
If we were going to narrow it down to those three options, I would say that's fair.
Okay, fair. So also, additionally, once you've seen somebody be pushed off the cliff, if you run down the hill and you run into somebody else coming up, Willis in my control room coming up the hill, and you say, hey, Willis, there's a dude pushing people off the top of the cliff. Is there any chance that Willis doesn't believe you? I mean, he's going to believe you. You're coming from the fire of
Willis
seeing it.
not believing me is higher than the chance of Willis believing me.
Okay, I bet he believes you. I bet he believes you, actually. I think you'll be so believable coming down in a panic state. Yeah, you're all right. I don't care. I'll disagree with you. It's my story. I'll tell it when I want to. But the point is that you now had two have and have nots. You had two companies that knew each other. One of them got to demonstrate that they did not have that attack happen, and one of them got to demonstrate they did. And now, because that person had it happen, they're like, okay, I believe I need to protect myself. And while it's not a one-to-one analogy, my point is that people trust someone once they've seen it and actually seen it play out in their real world. And I think that's what you're describing here is you had two clients that both received a phishing email. One was safe, one was not. And the one that was not decided to protect themselves, I'm guessing, after that.
So one of my favorite quotes is demonstrate, do not explicate. People don't believe what they hear, they believe what they see. So when you can show them how that customer had that problem, that would I can feel where you're going with that, with the empathy piece. Is yes, when they see like the trauma in that person's face, they're like, okay, they've actually experienced something. You know what? There might be some truth to this.
Yep. And what I've learned from you about my story is Mark Matthews should have had a film camera out in the beginning of that story, and he's running down the hill showing the video of Matt shoving Dom off the cliff. Then they'd believe you empirically. So that's maybe an addition to my story next time. Dom, you'll get filmed falling down. But anyways, Mark, you have anything else you want to close out with? Right? You've got the time, you've got the audience. Is there anything else you want to share as words of wisdom or closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap up this here show?
Well, there's something that I wanted to express in the beginning of this, and that's how grateful I am to have this opportunity for you guys to invite me onto this platform. I'm a big fan of the show, and it's pretty cool that you guys thought that my expertise was worth getting my insight for on this show. So thank you so much, and thank you for putting it out there. As far as giving something to give to my audiences, I would want to say, we've talked about this cybersecurity piece. We've talked about the value of modern technology. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to incorporate that into your success and where you're trying to go? That's not necessarily something that I want to tell them, but it's I want to influence them and spark that thought process. What can I do with what I heard today, hearing these weird, wild stories that actually might be really similar to something in my world?
Yeah. I couldn't come up with a more brilliant call to action than that, right? And I would only add that when we're talking about going to these conferences, going to these things, be Mark Matthews. Walk away with 30 or 40 things that help you understand something better, that are the things you wish you could be better at. And if you can't accomplish them right away, add them to the Disney drawer. Come back to them, visit them. Don't lose them. You're spending all this money to go and learn from and be around peers. Don't waste it. And I think that's the piece I'll leave it with, to say I'm grateful, Mark, for you inspiring me to see that people really were taking things and trying to contextualize them and walk away and use them in building their own organization. So I just want to say thank you to you. Dom, if you want to close us out, I appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, same. Thanks so much for coming, Mark. It's always a pleasure to hang out and chat with you. And with that, that is our show for the week. Next week, we have another cool show, another partner joining us from Brandon Martinez from eTop Technology.
This
really
kid's
cool dude.
Brilliant.
Nerds out on LinkedIn all the time about Microsoft
Oh, yeah.
security.
We're going to use so many
making big
acronyms.
strides.
We used no acronyms
So many
this time,
acronyms.
but
We're
we
gonna
will be
bump
using
that
lots
acronym
of them
counter.
next week. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Microsoft security next week with Brandon. We're super excited to have him on. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe.
Oh, that's
all that
2
jazz.
weeks.
Don't forget to catch
No.
all of the other Pax8 live shows. I'm ready to run a show. So you may get a different show next week. Who knows?
No, it's 2 weeks. I'm on dirt bike vacation next week. I'm going to be riding dirt bikes in northern Wisconsin. Yeah. So it's 2 weeks out.
2 weeks. We got Brandon Martinez on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun jazz. Boost the algorithm for us. If you caught us on LinkedIn, hopefully we can do this more in the future. Don't forget to catch all the other Pax8 shows. Don't forget Pax8 Beyond registration is open, and we will see you in 2 weeks.